changes to things. And so tonight, even though this isn't an action item, you can still give feedback on some things if you want us to change it or modify. It's not too late. We still have a few days before school starts. And so I know that up until the last minute, you get feedback from your constituents, having, advice and opinions on things. And so to kind of go over a few of the things, things that we're tightening up, first of all, the new big thing will be every student will need to wear an ID badge. So that's a safety issue, a security issue. Okay, so the little ones, pre-K through third grade, they'll have it attached to their backpack so they don't lose it. And we want to make sure they bring their backpacks every day and have it. That helps us keep up with them on the bus and on the porch and things like that. And then the older kids will each get a lanyard, kind of like what Daryl's got, with their ID badge around it. And we want them to wear that every day, so they'll we can identify them. And if there was somebody who wasn't supposed to be on the campus, you can quickly tell, hey, wait, they don't have an ID badge. So that's one thing that will be a little bit different. We hope the kids do well with the ID badges. Some things that we, based on fads and things that are currently, that come out that we have said no to, metal studded items, metal studded chokers, collars, metal studded chains, armbands, anything metal studded, we're not permitting. Another safety security issue, no full length jackets. They used to call those like dusters, the Western dusters. We've always kind of frowned on it, but we want to make sure that trench coats and things like that, as you recall from Columbine, that's what those two young men wore to conceal weapons. So that's explicitly stated in there now. Some old stuff that we just kind of rephrased. We've always had a rule where no hats or ball caps in the building unless there's a hat day when we're raising money. We stuck with no non-natural colored hair because we didn't want, y'all had given advice, if you let the kids do it, the staff would need to do it, and we didn't think that that was a professional enough look for the staff, so we said no non-natural hair color for any group. Stuck with that. So then that leaves two things that we could talk about tonight, would be allowing a small single ring or little stud right here on the nose for the nose rings, and then of course facial hair for students if it's neat, clean, and closely trimmed. So those were the two things that we were going to loosen up on some. Now, I reread that ACLU letter that we get every summer where they say, now, Barrett, Gatesville is one of many, many, many districts that aren't in compliance. And the main thing that they want is a gender-neutral dress code. So in other words, you don't have a laundry list of things for girls, a laundry list of things for boys, you just have your dress code. And so, so things like hair length, that's a foregone conclusion. We do not delve into boys' hair length anymore. You cannot. Same with earrings. If you're going to say a girl can have an earring, you cannot say a boy cannot have an earring. That's the law. That's what even our lawyer has said. So the two things that you're grappling with tonight, if you want to give us some more feedback at the, before we get started, wants to change anything, would be the nose rings and the facial hair. So what have y'all heard? What are y'all thinking?
I'm just curious what the thinking on the nose rings, why we're letting up on that.
Because the ones who go ahead and get a nose ring thing, they have to put a little plastic thing right here to keep it open during the day. So basically, you've either got a little plastic thing right here or you've got a little metal thing right there. And it's so, I'll give you an example. At our convocation, all the cheerleaders were around me on the wings. We were waiting to go out there to cheer. I wasn't going to cheer, they were going to cheer. But I just happened to look at some of their little smiling faces, and I squinted and looked at their noses, and I saw on most of them, little tiny bedazzlements right here. This little tiny thing. And I thought to myself, yeah, you can barely see it. So that's on that side. Facial hair, I don't know if there's a great population of students that will be able to grow that. But again, the one thing too, I don't want us to have a perception of, with all these rules, we always try to get rules that we think that, for the most part, the consensus is, okay, we get behind that. We don't want to have some sort of rule where we think, well, you've got a big majority of people that are real angry and upset about that rule. So if you think something is too out there, or that's let's just make one change, not two, let's talk about it. You know, we could do that. Everything in moderation. Do you want to just do one change this year instead of two?
I get hardly any calls on anything. I got calls on the cell phone when we were talking about that, and then I got calls and text and what have you when we were talking about the 3-strike, 4-strike
Right.
thing. But this, I've got texts from people I don't know. I've got phone calls from people I don't know and do know. I've been stopped at HEB in the parking lot by more than one person. I knew one of them, and 100% of them are saying no nose rings. They're all ages. They're both sexes. Like I say, I don't know half of them, but I've not had one person at any time call or text or stop me and have a conversation and say, "Man, I'm sure glad y'all gonna do those nose rings." I've not had anybody support them, and 100%, all ages. I'm talking about teenagers on up to older than me, which is old, and they're not. And I asked them why, and they said that's not appropriate in school. And I've had a person on staff express the same thing, and their concern was I didn't request any of this. I didn't solicit any of this. I've been right up front and as honest as I could be. And the staff person went on to say, well, it's hard for us to enforce this when we have teachers doing this. And they vented on that a little bit. Our dress code for our employees is such where it makes it difficult to enforce not having it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's where I'm at on this. They're consistent with what you say. That I've had 2 or 3 people say, well, I don't care about the beards because none of them can grow one anyway. And I got to thinking about that. Well, no, we're talking about 2 or 3 kids. What difference does it make? You know, I don't care. You know, but
Yeah.
I'm just giving you the information that I've got unsolicited. And I asked one person. In fact, I been to the grocery store and got stopped in the parking lot, and I'm coming up Main Street and I cut back on the Hornet Way. And you know, we got the cross-country track and there's people walking out there all the time. And I, for whatever reason, I just thought, it's on my mind. I just had a conversation. And I'm thinking, well, I'm getting more feedback on this than everything combined up to this point. So there's 3 people walking on the track, and I just stopped. I pull up and I say, hey, can I stop, ask y'all a question a minute? And it's exactly the conversation. I said, I'm on the school board and we're going to be discussing dress code stuff. What are y'all's opinions for or against beards for guys and nose rings? And man, one of them was adamantly, I won't even say that, they were strongly no, period, all that stuff.
Above.
And then, yeah, mostly on the nose ring. The beard wasn't that big a deal. That wasn't a volatile issue. And then that person finally quit saying what they were saying, and the second one stepped up. So I'm with them. I don't see a place for that. If they want to do that, they can do it out of school. The school's not a place for that. And then the third one said, well, it's not an issue to me, but why are y'all doing that? And I didn't say we were doing it. We weren't. We were going to discuss it. I said, I'm just asking y'all. I like feedback from the community. And that person as well said, well, if it's up to me, no. I mean, that's the parents' deal. That's not even the school's responsibility to say yes or no anyway. And I just left it and I said, thank you for your input, and got back in my truck and drove off. So that's where I'm at on this thing. Based on what I've heard from the community, I can't support the nose thing. The beard, I don't care. I mean, I did have feedback from a staff member saying their problem with it is that they already deal with kids that have stubble or a 2-day, you know, whatever. And their complaint was, or their comment, I won't say it's a complaint, their comment was it's so hard to be consistent in enforcing that. It's different from teacher to teacher to teacher. And some don't care and some do. So that makes it tough when coaches, teachers have facial hair, and some don't care and some do. And I can see that. That's putting our teachers in a tough spot right there. So whatever I think I brought this up last time, neat, clean, and closely trimmed. Who's to say what's neat and closely trimmed and all that? I mean, beards are beards, you know? I can't, I mean, clean, yeah, but neat and closely trimmed, those are kind of ambiguous parameters as far as I'm concerned. And that's my input.
I totally got opposite. I got from the teachers, I've got the students, most of the community that said it's about time. They said that, I even had one person said some of the students even loved having a beard for the teachers to go and say, hey, you go down and shave, simply because guess what? They got to miss class. And they just said it was just too much taken away worrying about whether you have an earring, beard, and stuff like that. So on 100%, I got totally opposite. That they just said it was about time.
Anybody else get any feedback, or?
I was the same as Calvin. I mean, they said, man, this is great, because there's so much classroom time wasted sending kids to the office for something that you can barely see, or for something that is, you know, a matter of opinion. Yeah, and so I don't have a nose ring. I don't plan on getting one. I don't have a problem with someone having them, and I don't think if you had one, it would distract me from the meeting. So I think that that's kind of how I'm looking at it. It's not that I'm like, world's biggest fan, let's get all our kids' noses pierced. I don't mean that. I just mean that in light of, is this a distraction in the classroom? It's more of a distraction trying to monitor who has one and send them to the office than it is to just, and not to mention, I have a huge issue with letting the teachers do something like that and not letting the kids. Because the teachers should be leading by example. And I think, so if you're gonna pass that's my personal opinion, but if you're gonna pass it for them, then you should pass it for the kids. So if we take it, then I think you take it away from everybody. That's how I feel about it. Because I feel like that this was coming, I said that to y'all when they had the mask on. I said, y'all wait till we take these masks off. All these girls are gonna have a nose ring.
We did tighten one thing on the staff dress code, which I've told you before is very loose. It's a very loose dress code for staff. And it was no shorts during instruction. So if you're a coach, you'd have to put on pants during the instructional blocks, but then you put them back on when you go out to athletics and things like that. That was the one thing we tightened on that. One other student thing that we did was also no duffel bags, you know, again, another security thing. So.
I am glad we're not doing gauges and stuff like that. Like, I think that it's not getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do we need to make a distinction between ring versus little stud thing? Is that the point of contention, that it's the...
I'm with Cheyenne. You really
think so.
can't see studs.
Well, the people that I heard from didn't really object to the studs, but strongly objected to the rings.
Did they make that distinction with you, Jim?
No, they just piercing, period.
Okay.
And tattoos aren't on here, but that followed in the same sentence almost every time. No need to, I'm for the teachers lightening their load. I'm fully in support of them, but whatever the code is, the standard is consistent.
Yeah.
I think we also need to represent our community.
Yeah.
And I didn't talk to one teacher. I didn't have one teacher contact me. The person I talked to is an employee here, and I call them a decision maker. Because, and we had that conversation. But every person other than that I talked to that I didn't, other than the 3 I stopped on the track, I didn't ask any of them. They just come up and said, "What the heck are y'all doing?" That, and they weren't employees of the school. But I think we need to do our best to reach a balance of supporting our staff and teachers and administrators,
Well,
and supporting the community we live in.
It's a hard balance.
Yeah.
and here's the deal with the teachers and the principals, and my understanding the last time, they were all for, because they just, you know, I think a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken, I heard this issue came up, and the teachers, they're all for it. I mean, they're just ready to teach instead of worrying about other different things.
And one of the ones that called me, she runs a tight ship. I mean, very tight in her classroom. And she was thrilled. She said she did agree on the colored hair. She said that can get out of hand and that can be a total distraction. But she said as far as these other ones, she said I think it's time, because that is just a reason for us to be disturbed in classroom.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought
And
for sure.
as a former teacher, when you get into things like this, I'm looking at both sides of this, it is very difficult if you're in a situation where you run a tight ship and enforce the dress code and your co-workers don't. When you are really the bad person. Why are you always picking on me?
Charles.
On the hair. At one time, it was a fad when they'd have like one red streak in the hair. I mean, as long as it's just not all dyed and different colored, are we gonna allow like a red streak in the hair because it's not a natural color?
Well, it depends on what the situation is. It depends, you know, if it's red, people have red hair. I guess it depends on what the color is exactly.
But on the earrings, I don't know. I was on my daughter. I don't like any piercing, period. But you have a hard time seeing that one little stud in the nose. But the way this thing is written, that I'm reading, that means one stud in each ear. Now, but I've seen, you know, one in the ear and then
Well, it says
a couple
in
on
the
the.
nose. It says in the
Huh?
nose. Instead of the nose.
Oh, piercing of the ears and a single stud or ring in the nose.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So you can't
Now,
pierce
clarify that for me again. If they
Maybe
want
we
to
should
wear
do it with
more
the
than one
ears.
earring or a
The ring.
piercing in their ears,
Yeah.
that's acceptable.
It's gotta
I
be a
think
stud.
it is. I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
Earrings have not been a big.
No.
No.
And,
I thought for sure that you were gonna come back and say it was more the facial hair they were worried about as opposed to the nose rings, because the facial hair would be more noticeable if they could grow it than a nose ring.
well, if you do just facial hair and not the other, it's more toward the men that get to do something to their face
Right.
that's an expression. And I believe we need to do both.
Would the
So
compromise
others
be?
is girls.
Would the compromise then be that it's not a nose ring but a nose stud?
Mhm.
Is that so you can have the little speck, but you can't have an actual hoop?
I think it's a good
You think
compromise.
that would be something where people say, well, that's so minuscule.
Other
Basically, it's
has-
keeping it open for them to wear it on the weekends and evenings when they're away from school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it needs to be a stud.
Mhm.
Stud.
Is that what the
good
principals have said,
compromise.
or have you talked to them?
I told the principals Friday late, I said, look, don't put anything out in writing yet, because the board is still grappling with this. They'll do whatever you want. The impetus behind, though, is the time and effort enforcing it. And I'd love for you to make some of the phone calls home to the parents that let them do it.
Well, don't you have to get can you do this under 18 without permission from your parents? Don't they have to sign for it?
I'm not
Yeah, you're
sure.
supposed to.
I mean,
Yes.
I guess
So-
the same would be true of the tattoos possibly, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
True.
Well, we're still running a top chip because we played a school in tennis the other day and she had tattoos all right here and all down her legs. So I mean, if we're not, you know, I mean, there's still some things that, it's not like we're just opening the floodgates.
So y'all, so is that, would that be good, would that be an olive branch, a middle ground that, okay, we will allow a stud, but not any sort of hoop?
Okay, well, hearing from the teachers or the administration, are the loops a problem?
Are they gonna have to run after those kids and say, take it
Yes.
out like they did with
It-
beards?
How do I phrase this? They're coming up and getting their schedules right now.
Right.
Their parents will allow them to wear clothing that is not in dress code. Okay, they're gonna come up in something that's not in dress code, and the parents don't have an issue with it seemingly, because they come up there with them to get the schedule. And so it's not just jewelry, it's clothing and things like that that we police then. And so, all of it's always a problem, as far as like, someone will always push the envelope if that's what you're asking.
I've got to ask them, I've heard you say it twice now, that our dress code for our staff is real loose compared to other schools.
Yes.
How did we get in that shape?
When I got here in 2016, I mean, staff could wear jeans all day, every day. I mean, I came from Belton where you only wore jeans if it was a jeans day, or you were able to get a jeans day pass because you did something. I mean, it was just much more stringent in other districts. And so,
I just,
We had always told our teachers back in my time, just dress, I guess you could say responsible or whatever, and that's just kind of the way we left it. And occasionally you'd have some young teacher coming in, they'd push the issue, and you'd have to tell them to go home and change, but we just dress professionally is what we'd tell them.
so like with the student dress code, we tightened up one thing. We try not to make big wholesale changes with either thing. And like next year, I'll probably propose no changes to either one, because this has been a draining, taxing process. You can only do this once every 7 or 8 years because you just get sick of talking about it. I'm sick of talking about it. And it's one of those things where it's so divisive and so polarizing. You could ask 100 people, and they're going to have 100 different types of opinions with various little nuances and here and there what they think is appropriate. But so
Am I correct in saying if we start out with this and it's not working, we can always change it?
next year,
Semester.
if we found that we go a year, then in the summer, if we found, man, that was sure a problem, they abused that, and we're gonna have to say no studs or no facial hair, you know, we can always do that. Just like we tightened the adult one. You know, before you could have shorts on, and now we're saying no shorts. But I warned them of that back in May. I said, before you do your summer shopping, you know, this is what is looming. The other thing I would caution you about too is like, we don't want to make it so unattractive on the staff side in an environment where it's hard to find people, and maybe you don't pay as much as other districts. You don't want to start making things so unpleasant that they say, well, I think I'll just go on down the road.
There is a school district who has allowed teachers to wear jeans every day as an incentive to come
Sure.
work there.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
I could see them doing that. So facial hair, by and large, that was not an issue. Going once, twice, because we could nix it.
I still have, who decides what's neat and closely trimmed? I mean,
The administrator. So there's always a caveat in the handbooks that says it's the administrator's discretion.
okay.
They have to add it because it is so subjective.
So the administrator has to see that individual,
Yes.
but if the student is in a teacher's classroom that really doesn't care, the odds of that administrator, I'm talking about administrator being the principal or something.
Right, you're right, it's the principal.
Then there's still a inconsistency there. If I have, like Linda was saying, I've got one teacher that trimmed that beard,
Mhm.
and the next one could care less, and that's fine. I mean, that's individual choice.
Mhm.
But we have a policy there that someone has to make the final decision, and
Correct.
we're setting the teachers up in an inconsistent arena to me.
It
I
was
hear what you're
already
saying.
inconsistent though.
Yeah, and I thought
Me.
that's why we're working on this, is to help the teachers have something that they can count
And
on
then the
consistently.
kid says, why are you the only teacher that cares?
Yeah,
I go second, third, fourth, and fifth, but I come to the first, and you're telling me that nobody else even pays any attention to it.
yeah.
Well, because that's what the code says.
Most of the teachers will send them to the office, say, you need to go see such and such and let them look at that. And so then they're not the ones saying, no, you have to get that changed. They let the principal make that decision.
Yeah.
And so that takes a lot of time out, chasing the dress code. And some teachers will send them and some won't.
That's where I'm coming from.
But that's not ever gonna change.
It was that way, it's that way last year, it's gonna be that way either way.
And
With or
it's-
without.
As far as teachers,
So,
being different.
so we're not talking about policy issues, we're talking about personnel issues. If we have a written policy,
No, because
Well,
it's
it's at
the
their discretion.
administrator's job.
then that's where I'm getting at. At the teacher or administrator's discretion. These finite words, neat and closely trimmed, is ridiculous to me.
That verbiage though is used very frequently across handbooks to other districts.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That-
It's hard to describe it in infinite detail, you know.
Yeah. Well, we do,
Looks good on
we
one
did
bit.
with the hair, you
Looks good on
you
the
touch your
next.
collar, that's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Well, here's-
This is where I'm shooting for.
That, well,
To help the
even
teacher.
with that,
Oh, I know,
that collar or her collar.
I got you, I understand.
And the thing about it is, when it comes down to, like you said, there is not gonna be no more than 2 or 5% or less of kids that can grow. And I get what you're saying, but it's not gonna be. Now, this is just my opinion. I could be wrong. You could have, but I just don't see a lot of guys with a lot of beards.
I agree with that.
Yes.
I bet there's not 5 in high school, so why do we even have a policy? If it's less than 1% of the students, why do we bother?
Because for those who want to because at one time you might end up having some, so.
My dad is calling.
Hello, Dad.
I do think I'm hearing from you all that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're not gonna allow earrings or studs, whatever we're not gonna allow for the students, we're not gonna allow for the teachers. And these people that come up there with long beards and all that kind of stuff, that has to go if we cut it for the kids. Am I wrong?
Does
I'm the
the
only one
teacher
that's-
handbook specify that also?
On beards.
On beards? No.
We can
trim?
we can make sure it says that.
Right.
That'll take care of that.
Well, I've got to say this. I'm hearing y'all saying teachers don't have any privileges on dress codes or whatever than the kids, but I did that 10 years in high school, and that would come up, and I said, look, when you go to school and you're out of school and you've got a degree and you want to come back here and do that, that's fine with me. But teachers, they're adults, number one. They're not students.
Excuse me.
And I think you give teachers a little more leeway than you would a student.
When I said that, I was referring to the nose ring, not
Well,
the
I
beard. So
understand.
like,
But
you're
that's,
a grown man, if you wanna have a beard, have a beard. I understand the clean shaven thing. I wasn't meaning.
no, but I've heard this, the teachers, if the teachers have it, then we gotta allow the kids to do it. I disagree with that. I think teachers should have privileges over a student.
But I get what
I
you're
think with
saying,
this,
but I
it's
also,
different
though.
but I also think the teacher should be
Yeah, we
setting
had a
an
teacher
example
a
too.
few years ago that she had a nose ring, we told her I had to take it out, she quit.
Why don't we try it on probation for a year and come back in the summer, let's see what happens.
I agree.
So,
We're
final,
talking about the beard.
all right,
I'm
so,
talking about everything, let's try it, and if we come back and say, with egg on our face, then we'll change.
Y'all lost me a little bit while ago. Are we talking about nose rings? or
okay,
nose
so let me
studs or what?
summarize what I'm hearing then, okay? All right, so, students and staff, Jimmy's favorite verbiage, neat, clean, and trimmed beards. But, so it'd be
It's gotta be
students,
clean. I think
Yeah.
we can agree on clean.
okay, clean.
What do you greet at school?
And what we do sometimes at the orientations for students, they show pictures and examples, like they may have ZZ Top up there and say, this doesn't fly.
Yeah. And
But-
see, that's neat.
They'll have pictures to help. Yeah, so they'll help explain it.
So why are we saying a teacher can't have a beard?
We're
No,
not.
we're not.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I was like, I
So-
don't wanna say that.
So
Okay.
staff
Yeah.
and students can have a neat, clean, trimmed beard. And then staff and students can have a nose stud,
Not a ring.
not a ring. And that would be the compromise to the folks that said, hey, you're going a little too far. No rings, just a stud. Does that sound palatable?
And I want it made clear that the board feels like this is a 1-year experiment to see how the kids behave. If this is causing all kinds of disruptions and behavior problems, then next year we can change it.
I didn't hear one person that talked to me say anything about stuff. Everybody said nose rings.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't even talk about the beard really, maybe once.
A stud you ain't gonna see.
Okay.
It might
So-
be these two, they might have thought we were gonna allow
I,
that.
Yes.
I don't know what they.
So we were already gonna tell
That is
them,
ugly, they don't know.
because that's a growing in popularity is this thing.
Yes.
And we were already gonna say, nothing in the septum, it's in the nostril.
There you go.
And so,
Yeah.
but beyond that, it wanted to be a ring, we're just gonna do the little thing.
All right, now let me ask you this one. We're talking about the little bitty, small diamond stud as such.
Right.
What if they have a diamond that big? I mean, are we gonna, would that not be considered? I mean, it's a stud, but
Is
it's
it-
gonna be a big stud.
Is it neat and clean?
You know, I'm always looking at the loop.
And closely
And
trimmed.
closely
What did you say about the hoops?
So what we're saying, Maria, when you stepped out, is that for staff and students, neat, clean, trimmed facial hair.
Mhm.
And then for staff and students, nose stud, not a ring, a stud. So the little bedazzlement diamond
Mhm.
thing there.
But nothing in the nose.
No septum, we never considered septum, but
And
not.
Charles, I like what you said on the 1 year trial. or
Yeah,
however
we
you
would.
worded
And the
it.
kids need to know that this is a trial and the board's not gonna put up with
Yeah.
Okay.
administration coming back and saying this just went crazy.
We need to put it on our calendar.
Yes.
So,
I
yes.
can't wait.
And neither,
Spend 35 minutes on this.
Yeah.
mine is not nicely
This has
trimmed.
been
I'm not gonna
35
put
minutes
rings
of our
on it,
lives,
but,
talking
yeah.
about nose rings.
I think that was very much a compromise,
I
a
think
nice
so.
middle
Good.
ground, that where, hey, we heard you, we went back and said, yeah, well, let's don't go that far, let's just do this. And so, but at the same time, it does help our administrators that enforce, let them check for a door being locked. Let them
Yeah.
check for,
Yeah.
was that good classroom instruction,
Mhm.
as opposed to that.
I did hear, and I know we're changing this up, I did hear, I was just happened to be in the coach's office where now at the high school, they're only having 2 doors open, and he was on their cases about if this door is unlocked, you guys will, well, I won't say what he said, but he let them have it. You better have these doors right here will be locked.
Well, guys, thank you all for that. I think that's a good middle-of-the-road decision, and I think that's as good as you can get as far as reaching a nice consensus and making people as happy as you possibly can. You can't make everyone happy.
Now, items we're going to be voting on: attendance, taking time for special high school programs.
So this is just a real quick item. So Wings and TBI, where they go over to Temple College, since they're not here, they're at Temple College, sometimes we have to take attendance for those kids at a different time. And then Wings, depending upon if you're a morning or an afternoon student, you're either here at one point or the other. Some of them go all day, but some of them don't. So the Wings program will take attendance at 9:40 for the morning session and 1:15 for the afternoon. Likewise, students attending Temple College's Bioscience Institute would need to be counted for attendance when they return to campus. So students who attend TBI in the afternoon would be counted absent or present at 9:40. Students who attend TBI in the morning would be counted absent at 1:15. So 9:40, 1:15 for both the groups. I recommend the alternate attendance taking times for Wings and TBI be approved as presented.
Any more information? Do I hear a motion? Linda, a second?
Second.
Okay, and all in favor? Okay, budget workshop.
Daryl.
Okay, Daryl.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thought my job was tough, just balancing the budget.
Oh,
But now it's like, okay, how do you make this as engaging as Pearson's?
You're gonna
Because
pierce
this is
the
what can
budget.
be really boring.
Yeah.
It's just numbers. So I've given you two handouts in addition to what was in the board book. One of them is the copy of the budget cuts, round 2.
oh, yeah.
This one right here.
You did the same thing to me.
And then also give you another handout called HR Budget by Fund. I wanted you to kind of be aware of how the HR breaks down by the different funds. I've got the budgeted funds first, which is 199 and 240. Then we have a number of grant funds that also have HR budgeted in those. And those grant funds total for next year $2 million plus of HR monies. And the big one, of course, is ESSER 3, which next year we've budgeted almost $1 million in HR, just in ESSER 3. And it's anticipated that ESSER 3 will probably have somewhere around 600,000 available to us in the following year. So it kind of gives you a nice glimpse into the future in terms of what we're going to be facing next year. We're not going to have 900,000 of ESSER money to be able to budget HR monies for. The following year we'll have zero. I mean 600,000 in the next year. After that will be zero. So this is what they call the ESSER cliff. That's hanging over us next couple of years. And so you think it was a tough thing cutting $1.5 million for next year. We'll have to do some of this again in the next 2 fiscal years after this. Borrowing some magical work from the part of the legislature, or good increase in the enrollment. The first indication on enrollment, by the way, is that it looks like we're at least be able to maintain the current enrollment that we had this past fiscal year, and perhaps with a little increase, right? This is the latest information we have. So it looks like maybe the hemorrhaging on enrollment has ceased, and then maybe we're going back the other way. So let's hope that continues. The other part is the attendance, which is very important. We averaged 91% attendance last year. We're budgeting for 93% next year. We would like to see 95%. And maybe it will be back to a 95% someday. But there's a lot of things that are being done administratively and through campuses to improve the attendance rate for next year. And so we're confident that we'll be able to hit that 93% for next year. So that means that the budget projection that we have seems pretty realistic. And so this sheet right here is a handout for you. It was on your laptops. Shows you roughly $1.5 million that was cut from round one when we initially presented this to you. The column in yellow represents our approved numbers, and the column in pink is the amount that was cut from round one. So you see that the total cut's about 1.5 million to get us to a balanced budget. And I must say that I'm very proud of the entire district for the way that they've reacted and have risen up to the challenge of cutting this kind of money off the budget and still be able to meet the needs of the students and operate efficiently. Everybody participated in a very fine way and did what was necessary to make this thing balance out for next year. I'll go through the numbers real quickly. If you have any questions, stop me and ask, but I'll go through line by line. HR was cut almost 400,000 from round one. Nobody lost their jobs. The pay raises are going through as planned. And how was this possible? So 400,000 came about through a reduction of all open positions. You know, used to we would budget a certain number of open positions just in case we needed them. And we would always budget at least one open position per campus. So you take away all the open positions, and HR department scrounged around and really looked hard at all the numbers that were in what we call the PMIS system, and removed all open positions for next fiscal year. So what we have in here is what we know is necessary to be able to operate our school next year. There was about maybe 6 or 8 positions that were moved from a professional position to a paraprofessional position. Things like some of the remedial type of positions that we had. And so we've done some of that through attrition, and that, you know, comes up to about 400,000. So a big chunk of it came out of HR. But again, no layoffs, and the raises are going through as planned. Any comments on the HR? We actually kept the ESSER 3 about the same amount that we originally planned, so we did not have to dip into that, because the more we dip into it, the less we're going to have of ESSER 3 left to use the following fiscal year. So we don't want to take too big a hit that next year. Now, each of the campuses were challenged to come up with a budget that pretty much equaled out the 18-19 fiscal year, which is the pre-COVID year, 18-19. And this is pretty much what they've done. Some of the most notable cuts were in professional development travel, conferences. They're going to be doing more conferences by Zoom. So we cut out a lot of travel monies. I think we'd already told you that we were cutting out things like library books, so they can use their accumulated funds in their activity accounts to purchase books. And then a lot of supplies, some in the area of technology and software. So after a while, you get a lot of software built up. You just renew it. And so this time we had them take a hard look at all the software programs that they're using. And if they really weren't using some, then those went by the wayside. And so we wanted them to keep the ones that they were actually using for the benefit of the students. So those were the cuts in the different campuses. Kate had a similar cut, most of their cuts came down under the curriculum and instruction, line 21. I'll talk about that later. Fine arts, here again, supplies had a lot to do with the fine arts. Travel, conferences, and anything superfluous or anything like that, a wish list. So we're really working more off of a needs list than a wish list. And this is the difference between what we've had them do, concentrate on. We want you to put in your needs, not necessarily your wishes. You may have to put off your wishes another year. And so the fine arts program came up with about 41,000 in cuts, and a lot of that came through the travels and the supplies. Athletics cut almost 150,000.
When you say travel and fine arts, are you talking about not taking the band to
Conferences.
football games or
Like conferences.
conferences?
Mm-hmm. No, they're still going to be able to go to the games, like they have. We haven't
And-
really cut any of that out.
And competition and
Competitions, yeah. And they had a pretty hefty supply budget. When you really have to do, you can trim stuff, and that's kind of what they've done. Athletics, a lot of this is uniform, because next year was actually going to be a pretty expensive uniform year. You have all the uniforms of different sports set up on a rotation basis. And so they're actually putting off all uniform purchases next year, extending the rotation for another year. And they've done the same thing with travel, supplies, anything that was a wish versus a need. And that's how the athletic program cut their 150,000. Playoff expense, we typically put in 100,000 for playoffs, and we feel that 75 would probably do for next year. But that again is iffy because it all has to do with how many playoff games they go to, and how these different even UIL events that they have, like band or choir or regionals, FFA. There's a lot of things that go to these different playoffs, but we cut that back to an amount that we feel that we can live with. No cuts in the food service. It's actually operating right now. We have it operating next year at $200,000 surplus, which could dry up, if participation doesn't hold up, because next year is going to be paid. They're just not going to be a free situation where everybody gets to eat free. So, but at least we're not having to budget any subsidy for the food service program like we've done every single year in the past, and that's typically been almost a $100,000 subsidy that we would have to budget for food service. Technology, 88,000 cut. A lot of that has to do with the rotation of purchases of equipment and labs. So they're going to put some of those labs off a year that they normally would have rotated, and purchased some replacement equipment. And again, some of the software was cut.
Do they still have enough Chromebooks for?
What's that?
Chromebooks, were they cut?
Chromebooks, any Chromebooks that was part of a rotation was cut. Yeah. Laptops, Chromebooks. So some of the labs, they were hoping, to renew next year, are not going to get renewed next year. It'll have to be done in the following year. Transportation, 73,000. Most of that's basically going to be cuts. That we're not budgeting any equipment acquisition.
What's a bus?
So no buses, no vans. They still have to have their fuel. Of course, we were able to negotiate a fixed price on the fuel, so that helps kind of limit our exposure. But they still have to have tires, they still have to have repairs. They kind of cut those back as much as they could, but most of this is in the equipment acquisition area. The maintenance program was 240,000 cut. No personnel cuts in the maintenance. Mostly this is going to be projects. So over a year's time, a lot of projects are done out of the maintenance department as they respond to requests from campuses and other departments. They're not going to be able to do as much as they normally do. And so now, again, the focus is going to be what's absolutely necessary versus what we would like. We'd like to have this, but we're not going to be able to like a lot of things. We're going to have to cut those out. And he's going to have to start saying no to many of the requests that come through to maintenance. So in this range, it's mostly projects that they would have typically done throughout the year. Capital outlays, we left the copiers, 3 copiers. However, those things just got a price tag on it the other day, and they doubled in price because of the supply demand. So we're arguing with that. We'll still keep it at this budget or less, but we're going to have to do some finagling on the negotiated price. INS stayed the same. That's just fixed cost for the bond payments. District admin was cut 43,000. Things like hamburgers, travel. We cut our budget for some software. We cut the budget for the Medicaid processing, which is now the company that different than the one we had before. This company charges 5% versus what we were paying before was 8%. So that cut out a chunk of money right there. District security, we increased it a bit. They're just extraneous items that we're going to need to purchase for our own police department. And this is a number that Barrett and his team were comfortable with. Curriculum and instruction was a pretty big cut. 100,000 of this 246 represents cuts in the CATE. We typically, in the last few years, have been putting pretty good chunks of money into CATE and doing a number of improvements. And really the necessity of doing those are not near as critical next year as they have been in the past. And what we've done is we're going to still be able to maintain our PIC code 22, we call it, which is our CATE PIC code, where we're supposed to spend so much money in this program. We're going to allocate some of the salaries of administrators at the high school and counselors over to this PIC code, and that made up for the 100,000 that was cut in terms of expenses. So again, it's what's necessary versus what we would like to have. And the rest of that would be probably travel, software programs, expensive speakers, conferences. So all that played into the $246,000 cut. SPED, same thing here. Programs that weren't actually essential were cut. We did cut the residential set-aside budget from a 50,000 down to a 30,000, so we cut 20,000 out of that. It's something we just haven't reviewed in a few years, and now that we reviewed their actual required amount of expenditure, we don't really need that whole 50,000 in there because we already allocate 100,000 a year out of our fund balance towards the residential set-aside. And that's that. The tax levy, the actual amount that came down a little bit. That was mostly the appraisal's office estimate of their fees went down. So that gets you to $1.5 million. Gets you to a balanced budget. And actually maybe a little surplus,
Because
100,000 surplus, possibly. Yes, sir.
wasn't you supposed to cut $1 million and you cut 1.5? Is that what you're saying?
What?
You were supposed to cut $1 million, but you went 1.5 million.
We cut $1.5 million off of the requested budget.
1.5.
So we got all the budgets that were requested by all the departments, we added them all up, and then we took $1.5 million out of that.
But you're saving 500,000.
We're saving 500,000?
Oh, Kevin, we were already 500,000 that we had to pay back. Correct, Darrell?
You talking about to the state?
Yes.
We're gonna owe the state about 900,000
Okay.
next year.
Okay.
We're overpaid this year, about 900,000.
We'll just take it out of
So,
Dr. Paul's.
yeah, that's part of the reason why we're having to decrease our budgeted expenditures and revenues, is because we're gonna have to pay this money back to the state. And,
Phenomenal job.
Oh,
we
no.
probably should have gotten,
Yeah.
if we'd really known all this, a little bit more aggressive on the cuts during this past fiscal year than we were. We just basically floated along like what the original budget was and didn't do a whole lot of cutting. And so, but at the end of the day, it did turn out where we owe TEA almost $1 million from last fiscal year. And, they did hold harmless for some of it. And I think we were probably a little bit overly optimistic about how the year was going to turn out. But as it turned out, we're in the hole. Now, overall fund balance wise, I'm thinking maybe 500,000. I think that may be the number you're looking at, is probably what I'm projecting, that the fund balance overall is going to go down. But part of that had to do with also the money that we spent to finish up the high school renovation. And that shows up on your fund balance amendments that you give in your board book each month.
So what is the balance? When we started this years ago, we had 20 million, we did the school and whatever, so what's the general fund balance?
Fund balance,
Fund balance.
around 12.
Okay.
The other side of the coin too was that we were able to narrow the gap in the budget by renegotiating our interest rates on our investments. And the feds have come up with a couple pretty sizable increases in the rates, Fed rates. And so now we've renegotiated our rates from the investments, and we're able to put in $100,000 or $200,000 additional income into the budget. So that also helped us. Otherwise, the cut would have been a little bit steeper than 1.5. Would have been more like 1.6, 1.7. One day, Barrett walked in and said, "We got to do something about the revenues." So, okay, let's see what we can do about the revenues. Then we just had these 2 rate hikes. So, okay, let's renegotiate our rates on the investments. And so we've done that. And the districts will get substantial more investment earnings next year than we did this past year. So that helps.
One other good email we got today is that we may be able to renegotiate one of the bonds on the elementary to pay it off quicker and at a better.
You mean next year?
Mhm. On elementary, the better rate on
In
that.
2014?
Mhm.
Yeah, it looks like we'll be able to renegotiate that 2014 bond as well, like we did the 2013 bond. And we're showing a little surplus in the INS fund, you noticed. And at that point, we would use any surplus we have to accelerate, the principal payments whenever we do renegotiate that bond. That'll be next summer when we'll probably want to have to do that. We won't know really until late spring next year what those rates are going to look like in terms of being able to refinance that bond, the 2014 bond. You want to dig deeper? No? I told you this wasn't going to be as exciting as your business. But anyway, I've given you a lot of numbers. So, feel free to ask any questions you have once you have a chance to study these. Took a lot of work on everybody's part, but we got it done. we did what we had to do, you know. So I'm very proud of the whole district for this.
The maintenance personnel, did they get raises?
Yes, everybody.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just noticed that, boy, they took a hit.
Well, yeah,
They're
the
gonna
maintenance
be lower
budget
than
here
the
does not
expenses.
include personnel.
Okay, that's,
Yeah, the maintenance personnel is gonna be up under HR
okay.
in line one.
I
So
noticed there.
this is gonna be projects.
You don't have two
Repair
school
projects.
buses on there too.
Yeah.
That's $200,000.
Is that under
That's
transportation?
I thought that was
Transportation.
transportation.
Well, okay.
But the maintenance, I noticed that's the lowest they've had since 2018, 19 there.
Which one you still on maintenance?
Maintenance, yeah. I mean, that's a good job. I just, man, they took.
So
a
it's
hit.
18, 19, their maintenance budget was 1.35,
Yeah.
1.34,
Yeah,
and we got it cut down to 1.3.
yeah.
So, like I say, most of this is like, we gotta go back to pre-COVID year.
Yeah.
And besides, you know, the enrollment was larger then, in 18, 19.
Yeah.
And so we're figuring that we should be able to operate the school district
I think
on
you
the
did.
18, 19.
I think you worked magic.
It's not easy. It's not easy saying no. Right? It's one of the hardest things to do is say no when people want to spend money. But you know, it's all for a good cause. I mean, everybody's, you know, wants their program to be better, and you know, and they always have ideas and what they can do. But this time we just have to like streamline it and say, what is it we really have to do to get through this? Because if we don't do this, you know, the future is in doubt. But we got to take care of business so that we don't jeopardize the future of the school district, for crying out loud.
Good job, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yay.
All right.
Gerald,
More questions?
do you have a recommendation? Do they need to do any action?
Is it an action item?
Information.
It's just
I don't
information.
think
No,
it
it's
is,
action.
actually. I think it's,
Yeah, it's action.
It was action.
it is an action item?
Yeah.
Why'd you put in an action item, Jerry? No, just kidding.
It looks like you-
I'm blaming it on Tara.
And she passed her out back up.
Oh, that's a, she's
It
a
is.
great girl. Okay, so this is the budget that I'm proposing, or we're proposing as the management for fiscal '23. And this will be the budget that will be presented on the 30th, I think it is, of August, where we approve the budget, final budget.
And that's a Tuesday, by the way.
Yeah. So we got one more good meeting now, that's,
So actually,
I will not be
What time?
there.
30?
you're not gonna be there for that one? That's exciting
What's the
right
day?
there.
we're approving
We're not gonna have any
Tuesday.
piercings on the agenda on that one.
so we're approving a preliminary
You're not gonna be here?
Correct.
on the budget.
Preliminary.
The real one will be later.
Yeah, this is the preliminary budget
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve this preliminary budget? And Jimmy says yes. Do I hear a second? And Calvin says yes. All in favor? And you even got a round of applause to them.
And it was less than 30 minutes too. You did a good job.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
But you're gonna
Appreciate
stay
it.
longer.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna go to executive session.